Hi, welcome to today's lecture. We're going to be looking just briefly, this will be one of the shorter PowerPoints. We're going to be looking at assessment and evaluation. I wanted to just set up in this week the work that we're going to be doing for the ECHRS next week. So once again, we're going to be working with the environmental rating scale. There are multiple ones. I have the early childhood, so that's kind of the late toddler preschool aged one. There's also an infant toddler one, and there's also a school age one. There's even a program evaluation one as well. So in this lecture, I just want to set up the idea of assessment and evaluation, because in your program, you don't have to use this environmental rating scale. It's not, in some programs, it is mandatory. People above you might have made that decision, but if you have the ability to set up an assessment and evaluation cycle in your center, there are other choices that you can have. I'll introduce two of them today, but I will stress the importance of assessing and evaluating your teachers, your programs, your classrooms, in addition to the work that we do assessing and evaluating children as well. So this isn't about assessing and evaluating children. That does happen. We have desired results. We have high scope. We have even the creative curriculum. There are ways that we can assess children's developmental ability, and we can also evaluate them. And then we give that information to the parents typically. Sometimes we also give it to doctors, or if the child has special needs or is in the process of having a special needs diagnosis, we might also meet with therapists and things like that as well. So this today is not specifically about assessing and evaluating children. It's about assessing and evaluating your programs. So I'd like to just start off with what's the difference between assessment on the left-hand side and evaluation on the right-hand side. So typically, because there are some differences and there's some overlap as well. So typically assessment is a system or a process where you document and use data and it's typically done to improve student outcomes or your program's actual ability. So your ability to get better. It's typically ongoing. It's usually has more of a positive slant, not always. It's typically individualized for the teacher, for the classroom, or for the particular child. And then it's typically used to provide feedback as well. So we're using data. So we might be looking at what children are achieving, in older classes, the reading level that they have. All of those things would go towards an assessment cycle. Then we have an evaluation, which typically reflects classroom components, class content, like what are you actually helping children learn? And we are helping children learn even in early childhood education. And then what do we, especially in early childhood education, what is actually in our classrooms? So do we have enough materials? What do our materials look like? Are they good quality? Are they diverse? And they focus on anti-bias education. And then it's typically a way to review the program and also gauge the quality. So it typically is somewhat objective, but it is also judgmental. So typically you can have a passing grade, or you can have an A, B, C, D, something like that. So there is kind of a judgment at the end, and it's typically applied against standards as well. And we'll go into standards and quality in a little bit. And sometimes it can also show your shortfalls, your vulnerabilities, the weaknesses that you need to work on as well. I actually think, and the reason that we really like the environmental rating scale is it's a little bit of both. So it's an assessment and evaluation. So it does give us data on the skills, attitudes, beliefs, and just what teachers know in the classroom and how they can set up their classrooms. It's also very individualized to other classrooms as well. So in each classroom, because there's the early childhood, there's the infant, toddler, and the school age, it's individualized to program. And it can also be individualized to the specific program that you run. And then it's also evaluation, because in each subscale that we'll kind of look at today, but we'll go much more into detail with next week, we have closure and there's judgments, and it also shows the areas that in each subscale that you need to work on. If what I'm saying about subscales and rating scales does not make sense to you, that is totally okay. We're going to do more next week. I'm just introducing the process and the idea of evaluating, and I'll talk a little bit about the ECHRS and why we do it. So then next week we can jump into the real nitty-gritty, and then you guys can get out and you can go assess a classroom and evaluate a classroom. So what's the focus and the purpose of evaluation? And there are lots of different reasons. So you need to know what the purpose of the specific evaluation that you're doing and why you're doing it. So sometimes we have to do an evaluation to prepare for accreditation. So NIAC and NECPA are the larger ones in California. There's also Montessori and Waldorf and specific to actual programs as well. So you have to do an evaluation typically before accreditation comes out. It might be a requirement for your funding agency above you, people above you, like your program supervisor or your principal, whoever you're working with, or if Head Start or a state funded program, it might be a requirement that you get evaluated. You evaluate your staff, you evaluate your program. A lot of times we evaluate our staff. We have program evaluations or ability evaluations. Sometimes they're tied with raises, sometimes they're not. Typically you get like an exceeds expectations, met standards, lower than standards, and that gives you, once again, an evaluation on your teaching methods. We can use evaluations to plan for improvement for a new year, so you could do one later in the year in order to make plans for what you'll be training staff, what you'll be buying, how you will be improving your program. And then you can also do evaluations as well if you have personal concerns about quality as well. You can do an assessment or you can do an evaluation. You also need to think about how the results are going to be used. Is the results of your staff evaluation going to go somewhere else? Are they going to go higher up your chain of command so that people at the state level or federal level can see what your teachers' abilities are? Are you evaluating your classrooms and your program in order to improve quality? Where is that going to go? Is it just going to be for you? Or are you going to share that with teachers? Is it going to help you perform better with customer service, plan for budget, help with staffing needs because you're going to have to get more staff, or you're going to have to jettison staff, and you're going to see how you try to do that? There are lots of reasons that you could do evaluation and what you're going to do with it. Types of evaluations would be formal observations. I did many formal observations, and this was a main form of evaluation within the military system. So at the very beginning, before you had you moved up and got different kind of within your rubric of within your matrix of your job positions, before you were able to move up from a general service 3 to a general service 4, you had to have a certain amount of formal observations, and they were all very, very prescribed. I had to be in there a certain amount of time. I had to observe certain things for each observation that I had to do, classroom, personal interactions, things like that. And then it also had a process of evaluating the person after the evaluation and passing on kudos and also areas to work on as well. The rating scale, once again, I consider a form of evaluation and also a form of an assessment. Typically, there's performance evaluations for you as a director, for your teacher, for any of your staff as well, to make sure that they are performing the duties of the job, once again, tied in with raises, sometimes not, but typically that happens. You evaluate staff once a year on their teaching ability or just their ability to do their job, and that's pretty standard across all workplaces, is that you know where you stand as far as your performance once a year. Then you can do a program evaluation. Once again, in addition to having the early childhood environmental rating scale, we also have a program one as well that could help the directors see how their programs are running. What's the focus and purpose of assessment? You need to decide who you're going to assess. When are you going to assess them? Is it going to be ongoing? Is it monthly, weekly, all of the time, quarterly? And then what do you do with this information? Because once again, you're looking at data and information, and you're looking at the knowledge and ability of your staff in your classrooms. Rating scales, once again, are assessments, because as we dive more into this next week, we will see that there's lots of numbers, there's lots of subscales, there's lots of kind of empirical research that we generate on what our classrooms look like and how the teachers are performing within them. Then we have observations, and these might not be as prescribed and as formal as the military system that I was talking about. It could be your weekly walkthrough and your ability to assess what your teacher is doing, and then from there decide if there needs to be more assessments. Surveys, once again, which we talked about last week, are a great way of assessing as well. Post-tests, and I never call it a post-test, but if you do a teacher training, it's a good idea to see where everybody stands. A Kahoot quiz online, a quiz like Kahoot, is a really, really easy way. It's fun, and if you have competitive teachers, it's really, really fun. You just have them put their name in, or you just make sure that if you're assessing 25 staff members, there's 25 names or emojis up on the board. and then it will show you how much the teachers answer the question correctly. All you need is a little phone. It's fantastic though. It's Kahoot, K-A-H-00-T, and then a exclamation point. Anybody can use it. It's totally free. I use this in my classrooms all the time. If we were lecture-based, I'll just ask questions. I'll reassess what the knowledge level is. And so you could do this if you did something on bubbles and how we could embrace bubbles in our classroom in ways that you would learn science and math in bubbles, because there's air pressure and they float and gravity and all this type of stuff. So if you wanted to assess that knowledge ability, you could do a really fun Kahoot, 5 questions. If you had you could tie a giveaway into it if you had an extra box of crayons or something like that. But then if all 25 people sign up, then for each question you can see where their level is. And so I love post-tests after teacher trainings. Once again, I never call it a test. I'll say, let's do a Kahoot or something like that, because that kind of allows me to see what everybody's understanding is without kind of the staff, because some people really hate the idea of testing or schools, or the idea that I'm testing them to see where they are. So a Kahoot is a nice way to do that. But once again, it's assessing your level of understanding and your knowledge based around ideas of quality. And once again, the focus and purpose of both assessments and evaluation is quality, to achieve and to maintain quality program. What is quality? So if you are, I know not everybody is currently in the field, but if you are in the field, everything on the right-hand side is probably very familiar to you. I really hope that it's familiar to you. We have our DRDPs, which are desired results, which are ways that we assess children, and it's also programs need to see this. It goes above us. We use the data and the knowledge to see where children are at. We have our preschool learning foundations. This is also another kind of benchmark or standard that we have within California of things that we want children to be learning. And then we have at the very bottom our community care licensing, which is very, very important. They are the ones that keep us in business and allow us to have our license and our permits and things like that. They are the ones that come into our programs and make sure that we have a healthy and safe program. That's primarily what they're concerned about, is healthy and safe programs. So we know that we need to have developmental standards across all of the domains: physical, social, emotional, self-help, language, cognitive, all areas that we need to make sure that we're teaching children and that they are progressing and they have great abilities in all of those areas. They're reaching their highest potential. We also need to have high quality program standards. That's typically where something like the preschool learning foundations might come into place. Not everybody uses those, but something that's a standard that we want all programs to meet is really important. And then requirements for teachers and staff qualifications. Many of you might be doing this in order to get your permit with the state of California to be a master teacher, a site supervisor, a program director. But we do have really specific qualifications. That's where licensing comes in as well. That's why you have to have a certain amount of child development classes in order to teach, as we need to make sure that you have the qualifications to handle our little ones. They have different needs than adults or older children as well. And then we also want to link our data, not just our preschool data. I should have written just data in general, but our infant, toddler, preschool, and school age data in with K-12 as well, because we want to make sure that children are, and I don't believe really in kindergarten standards, but I do want, because I think that that focuses way too much on cognitive, and I think social emotional is very, very important. I think most kindergarten teachers just want somebody who can sit down, play well with others, listen to the teacher, than somebody who knows all of their ABCs and can write their name. Typically, when I've talked to and when we have done research with kindergarten teachers, they just want those social emotional. They can always work with the other things later on. But we would like our data also to be included so that we can show all of the amazing work that we're doing in early childhood education and how we are preparing children in play-based programs and developmentally appropriate programs for their entry into kindergarten. So what else is quality? If I need to give you more, high staff qualifications. We are moving towards bachelor's degrees for a lot of teachers. Head Starts and some state-funded programs are already there, but we are moving towards more and more qualifications, more and more education for teachers, and we just need our salaries to hit that as well. We need to have professional development. That's why I had 2 weeks as well. So think back to the systems that we were putting into place for professional development, have a mentor, coach, and support staff members on a daily basis. Low staff-child ratios. So it's not 7 babies to 1 person. I've never seen that. That would be awful. But it's really, really low because infants need a lot of care. So we need really, really small ratios and small class sizes. As much as it's important in elementary school, it's also really important in our preschool programs and our infant toddler programs as well. Once again, developmentally appropriate, so we know to expect a 2-year-old to do something, and that's going to be very different than a 5-year-old. This is versus a 6-week-old as well. So we use our curriculum and we set learning environments that we've gotten from understanding of evidence, what the state has told us our standards should be, and also what we know to be developmentally appropriate about a 2-year-old. So all of those things need to work together in harmony so that our programs are running really well when it comes to curriculum and how we're teaching. Employee salaries are comparable to K-12 because once again, if you have a bachelor's degree or like me, I've taught in classrooms with a master's degree, but I'm not getting anywhere near what K through 12 staff is actually making, nor the benefits either. So that is my little advocacy point, that if we are expected to have a very high knowledge ability to work with young children, then we need to have salaries that are comparable. Ongoing program evaluation, which is what we're talking about, to make sure that we have continuous improvement and we are always running quality programs and maintaining quality programs, which involves a lot of different things. And I like comprehensive services for children because children are not just little children. They exist within a family and a wider system as well. And so we need to make sure that if the family is suffering, then the child is also going to suffer developmentally as well. And so we need to get them comprehensive services. So in a perfect world, this is quality. This is what we're striving for, most of us. We are not there in some areas, but I think that it's something that we could continue to work for as well. So you need to decide on your own within your own program. Once again, it might be coming from up on high. The state or the federal government has decided when you're going to do evaluations, but if you do not, then you decide when, how, where, and who's going to do them. So you're going to tackle the topics of quality programs, and then other questions you will have, you're going to have some more discretion over. And just because you have to do an ECHRS once a year for an ECHRS, once again, is this, it's a rating scale. Just because you have to do it once a year doesn't mean that you can't do it more often or do another form of assessment like Kahoots or observations. Or any other things. That doesn't mean just because they've told you one time what you have to do that you can't do more. So when are you actually going to do it? Are you going to do more than the standard because you think it's important for quality or not? How are you going to do it? Are you going to use a writing scale? Are you going to use some other formal observation method? You can find them online. I'm going to talk about 2 other ones here in just a minute. But there are a million. I mean, you could find them on Amazon. But whatever your program is, and if you're Montessori, if you're something a little bit different, you're going to have a very specific kind of assessment and evaluation process because Montessori's, Waldorf's, Reggios have a little bit of a different flair, and they probably need assessment and evaluation just basically about how teachers are, but also then within the specific materials that they have. Where are you going to do it? Is it just for a program? Is it for classrooms? Is it for teacher interactions? Where is it actually going to be, and who's going to do it? Is it you, the director, the assistant director, a mentor teacher, classrooms evaluating themselves with the rating scale, the classroom doing it and the teachers doing the classroom teachers doing it and the program management doing it as well, and collaborating? It's really up to you. My favorite with the rating scale is to have the teachers do it, to do a self-assessment, self-evaluation, and then I do one formally as well, or I have somebody else, and then we combine what we actually have. This gives me a sense of what the teachers think about their own programs. Are we in alignment with thinking that one area is in need of some support, or do they think all areas are okay, or are they harder on themselves than I was? Gives me kind of a social and emotional temperature take of how the classroom team is functioning. And then it also allows us to kind of sit down and do a plan of action that's more collaborative because we've both done it and we've both gone through the process of the rating scale. But it doesn't have to be. Sometimes it comes on high. Sometimes it comes from a totally different agency like the YMCA or Quality Preschool Initiative, something like that. Somebody very independent from the program might come out and do this as well. So these are all the questions that are individual to you and your program. But once again, just because a program is, if you have something from on high telling you you have to do it once a year, doesn't mean that you can't do a process of evaluation and assessment more often if your program needs it. So we're going to look at environmental assessments because our rating scale is an environmental assessment. It helps to assess the quality and climate of your classroom program, and it looks for the presence of indicators that are predicative of child outcomes. So we're looking, so what this has is a bunch, because we're going to go through it, of indicators looking at child outcomes, because we don't want it to be really low quality. We want it to be high quality because that means that we'll have higher child outcomes and they'll be doing better in their developmental domains. So this last one is the ECHRS, once again, the Early Childhood Environmental Rating Scale, which is what we're going to be looking at. And then there's a classroom assessment scoring system, and then there's the Early Language and Literacy Classroom Evaluation Observation as well. So these are both really, really great. A lot of programs use these already in California. So I would suggest these to you, especially the classroom assessment scoring system. So if you don't like the ECHRS, I would definitely look at the classroom assessment scoring system. That one is also very widely known as well. And then if you were looking more at language and literacy, if you were running a bilingual program, or you just wanted to make sure that your program was hitting the language developmental domains that they wanted, this one might also be a great observation for that. That's looking a little bit more at classroom interactions. So once again, I put a picture of it. I know that I flashed it to you guys a million times, but this is what it should look like. It's the revised edition of the ECHRS. So you're gonna buy this, or you're gonna get your hands on this, or the infant, toddler, or the school age as well. If you are working in our lab school, you need to have the Early Childhood Environmental Rating Scale because that's the kind of ages that we have within our lab school. You'll be at Menifee and you'll be able to sit there in the computer lab and watch what's going on over at San Jacinto. It's fantastic. If you just want to check out our lab school, this is a great way without having to get your vaccinations. You can just hang out in Menifee and watch it, and then also go into like our little mini classroom lab that we have as well. So for everybody, you guys can be doing this, or if you have your own program that you'd like to be working in a classroom on doing the rating scale, that's totally fine as well, because that is part of your ECHRS paper. All right, so we also have internationally recognized evidence-based quality improvement tool. So this is not just used within the United States, it's used within other countries as well. And once it gets in, it's a quality improvement tool. I think it's an evaluation and an assessment, but it definitely looks at our environment and our provision of materials. So books, crayons, just what do we have out for children? And then also it gives us some data and some understanding as well. So it's a very detailed observation and look, an in-depth look for classrooms to give us a snapshot of the day of practice using a range of indicators as well. So it gives us kind of a snapshot of a program on a specific day so that we can really kind of evaluate it for quality. So once again, we're going to do this a lot next week. Don't worry about it, but there's 43 items. There's a lot, and it's organized into 7 subscales. Space and furnishings, personal care routines, language and reasoning, activities, interaction, program staff, and parents and staff as well. So these 7 subscales give us, once again, a snapshot of a classroom. What does the classroom look like? What are the routines like? How are children being spoken to with their interactions? What kind of activities do they have? Once again, more about interactions as well. Program structure, what's going on within the program as well, and then how do parents and staff interact and work together as well. So those are, I wanted to put the ECHRS in again because I just wanted you guys to have a chance to look at it. I know in the syllabus at the very beginning of class I had that you needed to have this, but now you actually need to get your hands on it because it's going to be really, really important for actually doing your observation for your paper. It also looks like this is the early childhood, this is the infant toddler, this is the family child care, and this is the school age care. They all have different colors as well. The scale is designed to be used with one room at one group of a time for children 2.5 through 5 years old as well. And typically you need 3 hours to set aside for observation and for rating as well. So for your observation, you're going to need at least an hour. So plan on being in Menifee or plan on being in the classroom for at least an hour in order to do the observation. And then you can go home and do the rating scale after that. I would say budget for an hour and a half in order to be both in the lab, the computer lab, if you're going to the Menifee location, being on the computers, watching what's going on over in San Jacinto, and then going into the next room, which is like a lab classroom. There's no children there. You're just looking at what the furnishings are. So I would say budget for an hour and a half to be there in order to do that. Maybe even 2 hours, depending on how new this is to you. And then you can, go to the cafeteria, get something to eat, and do some rating after that. But I would say it's probably 3 to 4 hours for you to do an observation and rating, depending on how familiar you are with the scale. I've done it 100+ times. So I'm really fast and really good at it. I probably only need a half an hour. So I need a half an hour to observe, and I need a half an hour to rate. And then I probably need another hour after that in order to do an action plan with the staff members. But once again, I have a lot of experience with it. If this is your first time or one of your first few times, I would say 3 to 4 hours is just the act of actually doing the rating scale. And then on top of that, you will also have to write a paper. If you've done it a couple of times, you probably need an hour, and then you'll also write the paper as well. All right, so that is it for this week. I've kind of introduced once again the process of evaluation and assessment. Next week, we're going to do a deep dive into the environmental rating scale, and I will also introduce the paper that you're going to write. But just as a sneak peek into that, you're going to do a rating scale. So all of that stuff I was talking about, 3 to 4 hours, you're going to do one of those in a classroom that you know, or a lab school if you don't have access to a classroom. And that's the lab classroom and computer lab that we have at Menifee that I've given you information about multiple times, and it's in our end of semester video. It has specifically what the location is. So if you go to our lab school, it's a fantastic opportunity for you to see that over in Menifee. So you're going to do the environmental rating scale. You're going to look at all of the classrooms. You're going to be on the computer watching interactions of what's going on over in San Jacinto. And then you're going to rate it, and you're going to see in all of those subscales what the ratings would specifically be, and then you're going to write it up for me so I can see what you thought about doing an environmental rating scale, maybe what you would say if this was your own classroom. What would your key takeaways be? What would be some areas that the classroom might need to work on, or areas that they are superb at as well. All right, so that's just a glimpse in it, but next week we're going to go deep into what the environmental scale looks like, and I'm also going to talk about the paper in depth as well. And then once again, it will be due on May 5th. We're done with our weekly work for this week. That is the focus for the rest of the class. All right, thanks so much. Bye.